Morning, everybody. It's the 22nd, around 3 o'clock in the morning. So I was going to go into the inauguration and kind of acknowledge some of the things that occurred on the 20th. But before I do that, I wanted to discuss the Act of 1871 and kind of bring it to present day in a quick synopsis. But for those that aren't aware, the Act of 1871 is when the United States was turned into a corporation. So I'm going to read off of real quick. Website federaljack.com does a good job of explaining this under the Act of 1871, so you can go to that website. There's a number of researchers who I've utilized leading up to this point over probably 10, 12 years of research. The first person I heard talk about this was Jordan Maxwell, and I mean, you could find him on YouTube, Google him. I found him, I believe, probably on YouTube, but and then there was subsequent interviews off of Gaia.com, which is a video streaming service that you'd have to pay for. But so Jordan Maxwell's really good. Robert David Steele has interviewed Anna Von Reitz. She's a judge, I believe, out of Alaska, who talks about this to great extent. And then there are a few other people. If you actually YouTube, there's one person who explains a lot of esoteric information in addition to this corporatized United States. Ken Cousens is his name. And then there's also a Sergeant Robert HORTON. If you type in War Castles on YouTube, you should be able to find him. He's a U.S. Army Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations Commander. So he actually explains a lot of this in 90 minutes, and it really, I saw him, I want to say like 2 years ago, and he did a really good job explaining a lot of this. So those are really good sources to browse if you are interested. But real quick, just kind of going into this Act of 1871. The Act passed when the country was weakened and financially depleted in the aftermath of the Civil War. So it was a strategic move by foreign interests, predominantly the Rothschilds of London. But Congress cut a deal with the international bankers to incur a debt to these bankers. So the Act of 1871 formed the corporation called the United States, owned by these foreign interests who moved in and essentially threw out the original organic constitution. And all they had to do really to define the United States as a corporation was to change the verbiage from the Constitution for the United States of America to the Constitution of the United States of America. And they also capitalized it, which presumably is in legal terminology is a big thing. Apparently capitalization is not insignificant. So in a legal document. So these alterations predominantly are what caused United States become a corporation where they created the District of Columbia, being a city-state of, essentially the three city-states, I believe I explained this before, the three city-states in the world that essentially control, they all have a specific aspect to control the world. So Washington, D.C. is considered the military arm. London, the City of London, 1 square mile of City of London is the financial arm, and then the Vatican is the third city-state, which is the religious or leadership arm. So Washington, D.C. In 1871 was created to essentially take over the United States or cause the United States become a corporation, and unfortunately that made us all vassals of that corporation or employees, I guess you could say. An example is, so instead of having absolute and unalienable rights guaranteed under the Constitution, we the people then had relative rights or privileges. An example is the sovereign's right to travel between states even, which has now been transformed under corporate government policy into a privilege that requires citizens to be licensed. So that was one example of kind of how, people can grasp that idea of what's changed. But again, look further into this if you're interested. I mean, I've researched this extensively, but I can't remember every single piece of information. But a lot of really good stuff, and I gave you guys the sources. All right, so utilizing that, so Act of 1871 caused us to become a corporation, and then they fundamentally, these, this Illuminati New World Order group transformed more and more of America, and took over the leadership, took over different institutions, created new institutions. The Federal Reserve was created in, I believe, 1913 under Woodrow Wilson. So that obviously the Federal Reserve is controlled by a number of banks. And I thought I brought something up here, but so all these banks then created, I can't remember what year, but they also created the IRS. I want to say it was in the 1930s under FDR. But this was a means of controlling our money supply, which obviously if you control the money supply, you control how the country functions. And there was actually a congressman, he proposed a bill in 2018 to return to the pre-1913 gold-backed US dollar. Let's see, so the legislation that he was putting forward noted that the International Gold Exchange Standard from 1914 to 1971 did not provide for United States dollar convertible into gold, and therefore helped cause the Great Depression and stagflation. Most people understand it like once the in 1913, once the Federal Reserve came into power, the dollar lost over 96% of its wealth because of inflation, because obviously the gold standard maintained the dollar at a specific value. Once that was lost, all they had to do was continuously print money, and that obviously causes inflation and the dollar loses value. So we want the dollar fixed to a specific commodity, and gold has always been that commodity for the most part. Yeah, so the gold standard puts control of the money supply with the market instead of the Federal Reserve. Gold standard means legal tender defined by and convertible into a certain quantity of gold. Under the gold standard through 1913, the United States economy grew at an annual average of 4%, 1/3 larger than the growth rate since then and twice the level since 2000. Some experts, in this sense, this is, again, 2018, some experts question whether or not the U.S. has enough physical gold to back the U.S. dollar. A lot of that has obviously changed. I had mentioned in a previous video about Simon Parks had acknowledged through his sources that the Vatican Bank was raided, I guess you could say, and they collected roughly, Simon I think said quintillion, 34 quintillion, or yeah, so he had said that taken from the Vatican. That's through like cash, gold, and artifacts. Charlie Ward, I believe he had said 34 quadrillion. So either way, it's a huge amount of money. And this would obviously finance a lot of the economic changes that are coming through creating this new quantum-based financial system that we're supposedly going to go on, or it's already being signed by all the countries in the world. So it's just a matter of implementing it. And my understanding is it can't be implemented. This new financial system can't be implemented until all of the cabal is behind bars in essence. So they can't take advantage of this benefit of transitioning over to this new financial system with a gold-backed currency. And my understanding is all the countries would have some kind of currency that's backed by gold, silver, platinum, whatever it is. I imagine most of it's gold though, backed by gold. So all right, so that goes into 1913, and then leading up to President Kennedy in the 1960s. He was assassinated in 1963. Predominantly, I think I mentioned this, his assassination was tagged to he was trying to dismantle the CIA. He was also trying to do away with the Federal Reserve note and institute this new greenback currency, which would be backed by gold. So that was a huge part. The bankers did not like that. And even though the Kennedy family is considered an Illuminati family, I believe their original name is Cavendish, they still decided to murder President Kennedy and then his brother at one point. So going then from the Kennedy assassination, actually developed into, this is where the alliance really came into play, because you had so many military leaders, generals and whatnot, that recognized his assassination for what it was. And there was roughly, I believe, the amount of generals at the time was like 200 generals that made a concerted plan to go after this cabal, this international cabal, and take back the sovereignty of the United States. So that's when a lot of this started, when I guess the alliance really came into its own, not power, but its own stand, made a stand, I should say. And then, fast forwarding to, let's say, 1995, you had, want to quickly go into the effort that the alliance made to go after and arrest Bill Clinton. In 1995, they were going to go arrest him. And if you go on David Wilcock's website, Divine Cosmos, you can find one of his articles from, I believe, 2013. Excuse me. He goes into the alliance. He goes on April 17th, and this stems from an article by Sherman Skolnick, so you can also look him up. But so on April 17, 1995, 8 high-ranking U.S. military members of this secretive patriotic alliance breached normal protocol and boarded a plane together. Some people say it was like 17 U.S. military members, or it could be a combination of civilians and military members, U.S. military members. So this was a very important flight. They were about to press criminal charges against the president in an attempt to take down the Federal Reserve. All 8 of these brave high-ranking officers were killed when their plane crashed. The event reeked of deliberate sabotage. I can't remember if it was like a missile that hit or if they crashed. So let's see. There's official records of the crash that exists, but only 2 days later, so that happened April 17th, 1995. 2 days later, an American federal building housing FBI personnel was attacked and destroyed, allegedly by a fertilizer truck bomb. They show, so that building being the Murrah Building in Oklahoma City. So if anyone who was alive in 1995 remembers the devastation of this attack on a federal building, there's pictures I can actually show you real quick. Let me show you some of these pictures of the those that aren't familiar with. You got, all right, so that was the federal building, the Murrah Building, that was destroyed presumably by a fertilizer truck. So presumably it made such a large blast in the side of the building. So you have, in this next part, you have an article that says the first expert to go public with the discrepancies of how the building was destroyed was United States Air Force Brigadier General Benton Parton. So you guys can read that if you want to later. He knew that an air blast from a truck on the street could never remove reinforced concrete and steel.